and welcome to the Mise-en-Scene Weekly podcast, where we harken back to our college debate days and pick two movies of the same theme to rest delicately and entirely on the shoulders of one person. Well, this week's episode is focused on movies with one character, with Locke treading the waters with Swimming to Cambodia. Come join Jonathan and Steven for another week of desirably less plot chatter and hopefully more film banter. We are Scene Weekly, and welcome to our world.
Welcome. Happy to be here. How you doing, Jonathan?
I've been better. Had a sick child for the entire week, including today, with pneumonia that we have been roiding up, regrettably. Got pretty bad, bronchitis and pneumonia. I'm no doctor. I had to go to a pulmonologist, see what exactly was going on there, because this has happened like 3 or 4 occasions in 4 years. And we all are sick at the same time while trying to work, and it's been interesting. But allegedly, I don't know how. I haven't gone to the doctor myself. I don't have pneumonia, or so I think. But I have had extreme battle since Georgia, my time with you, like 20 years ago at this point, of allergies this year.
Really?
Allegedly, this where does she go to school? She went to one of the Seven Sisters. It's not Wesley. Anyway, she went to the highest of Seven Sisters schools, just the W. It's escaping me. This is a lot of things are going to escape me in this episode if I had to guess. Anyway, she was telling me today, actually, that to take care around in New York area as well as Long Island, to take care of the female trees, which don't produce pollen, it's a lot harder, because they bear fruit, and if they're bearing fruit, then management of the fruit trees and the cleaning up of the streets is going to cost far more than if you were to just have male trees. So the reason is they started killing off the female trees and planting more male trees, which in essence has increased the pollen count across like Long Island and New York. And this is the first year I was talking to all my friends, and I was like, what is happening? Like, I've never had allergies in 20 years. Like, what is happening? Well, it seems like that may be our answer, and it's not very fun. And I would prefer to have fruit on the streets than fruit in my nose.
Yeah. There's too many male trees. It's just it's a big sausage fest out there on the tree world.
How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good, man. I got my coffee. I made it in
You look pale.
Yeah, I need to get some sun.
You need to go outside.
Yeah, I've been running a little bit, but that's not too much sun. And I'm not really laying out when I'm running, so it's you look kind of pale too.
If you would see me, actually, it's the lighting. I'm definitely darker than my wife and darker than most people around me. I'm very bright, actually.
All right.
Reddish orange.
Well, you sound good.
Anyway.
You don't sound too sick, so that's good.
Yeah, it's just it's all in here, and it may come out on you later, but it's all in there.
Yeah,
Nonetheless,
I was thinking about not showing up to this podcast and you just doing a one-man show and seeing how that would go, but
my dream. This is what I'm hopefully I can push you to give up to where I can just do Mise-en-Scene Weekly alone.
Alone, right? Yeah.
I could actually argue both sides, and then I could I don't know how I would go first or who. I guess I'd flip a coin and then I would argue for it. I think it'd be much more interesting than this, though.
Well, you're stuck with me. I'm not going anywhere. So there you go.
All right. At least we don't have a vacuum in the background today.
Yeah, I'm fixing my own mise-en-scene here to correlate to what we're trying to do. So
yeah, so this actually came about. I mean, we pitched ideas to each other all the time, and I was thinking of one-man shows, and I think we talked about it last week, but it seemed to make the most sense. But having one character, I was thinking quite literally of one-man shows, but outside of Spalding Gray, you don't have a lot of one-man shows out there that are on film, so or specifically meant in this capacity. So Locke had to
when you sent me that message of like Locke doesn't fit into the parameters, I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, this is a one-man show. It is.
Show. I mean, it's there's first of all the construction site that he's leaving. There's multiple people involved. In essence, I mean, I guess if you were to take the background of, I mean, a one-man show is a guy literally on stage giving a one-man show. For example, my friend Fabian Hartwell, his name is Fabian, of course, Fabian. Shout out Fabian, love you. And he from New Zealand, lives in London, or used to, and then moved all over. Lives in Pakistan now, but he had a one man show where he literally went to like a cabaret type place and gave um, a show called Fab is My Half Name, um, which was I've seen bits and pieces of it, but fantastic, great singer. But nonetheless, that's a one man show, one person on stage, the entirety of it. It's basically, in essence, a kind of not a comedy skit per se, but a dramatic version of,
Monologue.
yeah, it's a dramatic monologue, and that's what I was expecting you to come back with, and I was like, this is what?
There's not much to scrape at the well there. It's just that
Well, there's
Spalding Gray.
13 of Spalding Grays, so
Yeah.
there's that. Don't know how else you could, there are others, but you had to search for them. But nonetheless, it seemed to make sense. I don't know what to title this, but nonetheless, here we are. We found
Here we are.
found one. Yeah,
I was going through my brain and I was thinking, because I had never heard of Spalding Gray or swimming to Cambodia. So when you said one man shows, like what was going through my mind was obviously Locke,
yeah.
Castaway, All Is Lost. Like I guess Castaway wouldn't really fit because there are other actors in there, but it's primarily, deserted island kind of movie.
Do you like Castaway?
Castaway is it's one of those films that came out when I was eighth grade, ninth grade, and I was actually working at a movie theater, and it was like a 2-screen theater, and we got to show that, and I probably watched it like 15 times while it was on.
Wow. I
Yeah,
think it came out in 2000.
yeah. I was
Yeah,
just in high school.
2000.
But yeah,
That's a lot of times.
I loved
A lot of
Castaway. I thought it was great. I haven't seen it probably in 15 years, but
That's a lot of times, and you repeated 15, so I'm really curious to see if that actually number is real or not. But with that said, I watched it recently, and I do have a story. When I was in, I guess I was whenever it came out, I believe I saw it in theaters in Baltimore with a high school friend, his now wife and his sister. I think his entire family, my family too, or at least my mom. And we went to see Castaway, and this was like my transition at the time where I was pushing away from the godliness that my mom tried to infiltrate into my brain for a long period of time. And I was like, doing that sort of thing, that little shindig. And we went to see Castaway, and I remember it being at the very end. For some reason, I just hated the ending passionately, because I think I was more into like, which I actually like the ending now, which makes perfect sense. But then I kind of didn't like the whole entire movie, to be fair. Just annoyed me. And so I remember, I won't say the person's name, but very nice person. And I said, "What the hell was that?" And she's like, "Oh my gosh. Oh my goodness." Like I said hell, because she's like a major Christian. And then I was like, I'm going to double down, because if it wasn't clear before, I'm angry. And I was like, what the hell was that? That's ridiculous. It's absurd. And I remember her reaction was like, wow, I can't imagine if I said, what the fuck was that? I'm going to lop off my studio here. Look at that. It looks better that way. But anyway, it's just a weird, it reminds me of that movie. But I saw it recently again, and it's better. Much better.
it is. Yeah, it is. I mean, I think the ending is it's him going back to Helen Hunt's house, and she's married, right? Isn't that how it ended? Yeah,
that's
she's got her own life. He needs to start his.
But then he takes the package and delivers it, and he's like, well, maybe there's love in the air after all. I guess that's why I didn't like it. I was just like, it doesn't have to end happy. Like, clearly somebody's gonna move on. They thought he's dead for that, like, years. Like, duh. You think they're just gonna wait around forever? Like, come on, get on with your life now. And he tried.
Exactly.
But anyway, nonetheless, I think I would rate it very poorly. But it's better than I originally thought. So anyway, Locke. Who's in Locke?
I'm trying to think about the whole cast here. We got our main man, Tom Hardy.
Love Tom Hardy.
And it's funny because like he he's a great actor, but a lot of his big roles, especially like Christopher Nolan, he his face is covered up more than half the time. Like in Bane, you don't see
Yeah.
his face. In Dunkirk, he's flying a plane
Pilot.
and he's the mascot. You don't see his face. This we get full Tom Hardy. This is like, I mean, the camera is on Tom Hardy 98% of the time.
Full Tom
Um,
Hardy with his Welsh accent. Yeah.
is that his real accent?
No.
I didn't think so.
Mm-mm.
He does a good job though.
He's a very good accent on a variety of on everything he does. Frankly,
Yeah,
yeah, he's
yeah.
terrific.
So you want to jump into Locke first? We'll go into it.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I wasn't even thinking. I was just asking a simple question. I also have one person, Spalding Gray. Look at us. Easy enough.
When did you come across swimming to Cambodia? When did?
It's been a long time. At least I don't know, 15 years ago, maybe
There's that
20.
number 15. Yeah.
Yeah, it was. I think in Korea, so it would have been 18 years ago.
Did somebody introduce you, or did you just like see it, pick it out? What?
No, a lot of movies. The way I find movies and music is the same methodology. Once I like something, I will. I should have created an app way back in the day for somebody for helping out other people to do this. But basically, I would look up songs or music I like, or bands I like, and directors I like, or movies I like, and I would type in. And I still do this exact same thing to this day. But I go down pretty deep down the suggestions of Reddit and the suggestions that I find. Basically, like movies like monologues or something like that, or movies with one character, and I'm sure it allowed me to find this. But in Korea, I did this a lot because I had plenty of time to do it, just alone, one man show, and while writing a book, and so I would watch like 3 movies a day, basically. And so that's how I found it, basically just googling things,
Okay. Yeah.
and then I offshoot of things takes you weird places.
Yeah. I like that. Yeah. I just came across this movie this week from you. So
Good.
happy to have watched it. Happy to talk about it because, frankly, it was completely off my radar. And this is like a movie that I don't think would get. Do you think a movie like this would get made today and released in theaters? No.
Yeah, possibly. I mean, I don't know. I think it would be more likely to be made back in the '80s than now, of course. But yeah, I think it's possible. Releasing in theaters, possibly not. Probably not.
Yeah, this is more like a
Local
Netflix.
theaters, New York local theaters for sure. You can definitely see it there. Like what's that? The one not it's on the Upper West Side, in like 64th Street, where I've been. They play all like the weird ones like that. But nonetheless, on to Locke.
All right, Locke. It's 2013, directed by Stephen Wright. This is his second directorial movie, but it stars Tom Hardy. Got a budget of $2 million and a box office of 5.1, 91% on Rotten Tomatoes, and they filmed this over the course of 6 days. 6 days with Tom Hardy in the car, and the
Yeah,
other actors in a conference room in a hotel, just basically doing real time the movie over and over again for those 6 days. The story follows Ivan Locke. He's a construction worker or foreman who embarks on a 2-hour drive that will alter his life and the life of his family. You see, he is supposed to be preparing for the the largest concrete pour in Europe, yet he leaves the night before. His sons are getting ready to watch a big football match. His wife is making sausages and finally wearing the jersey of the home club. But Locke is not heading home. He is going to a hospital to be with the woman who is giving birth to his child, a woman he barely knows. Over the course of this drive, we unravel a man who is trying to make right his name. Through only phone calls and a magnetic performance by Tom Hardy, we learn about a man who will do what he believes is right, even if it means blowing up his own life.
wild.
Yeah. I mean, elevator pitch for this movie. All right, I'm going to make a movie
Yeah,
about this guy taking phone calls in his car, and his life is going to shit.
and they're like, "I'm in." Like, wait, who's playing him? Tom Hardy. Okay, we're definitely in.
Yeah,
You
definitely
know?
in.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean it's one of those. It's it's a film, and both of these films are using the constraints of what they have. It's kind of like I read a review about this, and it's kind of like have you ever heard of the author who wrote a whole novel without using the letter E?
Yeah, of course. It's
It's
the
it,
Gatsby.
yeah, it's kind of
Yeah,
like that. It's like
it sucks.
oh, does it? Did you read it?
Halfway in, you're like, something is off. Like something's really off.
Yeah, but yeah, the constraints of filming and telling a story, a compelling story at that, with drama and stakes and character, with just one person, one actor. Um, it's hard to do, and they pull it off. I feel like Stephen Wright and Tom Hardy pulled this off very well.
No, yeah, extremely well. And it's funny that you mentioned Gatsby because it's like the same thing I do with books. Like, oh, books that are similar to whatever. That's how we got Alejandro. Like, if you go deep enough, you'll find the weird, marginalized human beings that are making the weirdest shit possible. And I'm sure if I even, I went about as far as I can possibly do in my own moral box. Like, I'm not going to do like, what is it, like faces of like where they're like killing people and you want to watch beheadings and stuff. Not into that,
No,
even
yeah,
even remotely. So I've definitely maxed myself out. But there's also it's called Hopscotch. There's a book called Hopscotch. I haven't read it yet because it's like allegedly extremely difficult to even process. But you could pretty much, there's no end, there's no beginning, and you can pick it up in the middle of the book in whatever chapter and just start reading it from there because none of it's basically going to make sense. There's no finality. It's just like compilation of stuff put
interesting.
together. Yeah, I still haven't read it. It's pretty thick, maybe like 500 pages. But I was like, this is going to be an endeavor. I've had it for like 5 years, but nonetheless, Gatsby, I which was 150 pages, I read quickly. But anyway, I like this premise. Who else though? Because Stephen Wright said Stephen Knight, Stephen Wright,
Stephen Wright, yeah,
Stephen Wright said that he only Tom Hardy basically was going to play this role. So I'm
or
curious.
Stephen Knight. You're right.
Yeah,
I'm saying it wrong the whole time. Sorry about
who
that.
who else would play the main character? Who else could play the main character? Honestly,
Oh gosh, Tom Hanks.
no,
I'm kidding. It was a
no.
Castaway joke. Um,
Okay.
that's a good question. I mean, it's got to be somebody that you can see everything in their facial expressions and what they portray. Um, Daniel Day-Lewis.
Yeah, I mean, he could play anything for that matter.
Yeah,
It's a tough one though, but not many people can, I think, pull off this role. But I just love the premise.
yeah. I mean, it's a very simple premise. He's a man who has to make a decision, and he feels like it's the right one for him.
Yeah,
He's a family man, but he
I don't
has
want to get. I don't want to get to the decision. I want to. I have a larger idea on that decision, on like to go or to not go, that I want to keep for later. Because to me, it's like I have a lot of ideas, and I've talked to a lot of people about this, and I'd like to keep that and table it for now. I don't know if you're going to go into it, but let's definitely answer the question at the very end of your presentation.
I okay, and I'm excited to get there. But we can kind of talk about just the basic
Yeah,
plot formula. Like, so he's a
for sure.
family man.
Very much so.
He's
Yeah.
got two kids.
Yep.
Um, one of those kids is played by Tom Hardy. Funny enough, one of his first film roles, or not Tom Holland, Spider Man.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but yeah, he's a family man. He's also very he's a foreman, and he pours concrete, and he's a very exact person. He's very exact.
His attention to
Whatever
detail. Yeah.
his attention to detail, and he corrects
Pristine.
people too. Like when he's talking to his boss, and his boss is saying, "You've been with us for 10 years." He's like, "No, it's been 9." And he repeats it. He's like, "Well, you're going to throw all this away after 10 years?" He's like, "Actually, it's 9." And it's that kind of like exactness that gives you so much idea of what his personality is like and what his moral compass is.
Yeah. Pedantic,
Pedantic. There we
some
go.
might say. Do you really have to, in this conversation, correct somebody about the difference between 9 and 10 years? But that's attention to detail when it comes down to it. And when you have a storm around you, and it makes sense. That's the thing he's like clawing to, his moral box that he has created, and the application to that box. We're probably already going to get into like the decision making process, but
No, we don't have to. But we get these phone calls, and the first part is like we're kind of learning about this man and seeing why is he leaving the construction site? What is he doing? He's not going to go
yeah,
home. Like what? And then we find out. We get the phone call from the mistress that he barely doesn't even know.
yeah,
That
no,
she
doesn't know her. Yeah,
doesn't, and we find out that he's driving to her
yep,
to be there at the birth of his illegitimate child. Um,
that's right.
and we learn that through this drive that he has some past trauma from his own upbringing,
Yep,
and that plays a central role in his decision, which we can get to later. But he's talking to his dead dad in the back seat that we never see, but it's just
yeah,
a figment of
yeah,
his
yeah.
him talking to him
He's looking at his past.
and looking at his past. Yeah.
Yeah,
And I'm wondering, do you, when you're driving alone,
yeah.
do you ever talk to yourself?
No. Well, I have. I take voice memos. Does that count? Where I'm talking to myself. I'm talking to myself in the future who will potentially listen to it.
Yeah, I mean that doesn't really count. I think having conversations or talking to yourself. I mean, uh, like what do you do on long drives? Do you listen to music? Do you listen to podcasts?
Podcasts.
Yeah.
Mostly listen to Joe Rogan, I would say. And if there's no more Joe Rogan, I don't listen to music ever. I used to a long time ago in college. I'd listen to the radio and just scan, scan, scan. That was a lot of fun until the radio started to become shite. So I stopped doing that, and then podcasts came out, and I like to learn as much as possible. So it's either going to be a book on tape or a podcast,
Yeah.
and only Joe Rogan, pretty much.
Yeah, I'm a book on tape guy, big book on tape on long drives, finding long podcasts as well. You know, some people might even be listening to this podcast on a long drive, talking to
What's your
themselves.
favorite podcast?
Um, I like Radiolab. That was like the first podcast that I really got into. I Can I choose Mise-en-Scene Weekly?
That's a softball for us. What's going on here? Should be a knee jerk reaction. This
Oh
is
my
going to be a
gosh.
one man show soon enough. My God. How's your back doing, by the way?
I need to get some support here, but we're good. We're good. So let's get back into Locke.
Riders of the Storm.
Uh, so he's driving to the hospital,
Yep.
and he's juggling. He's juggling two big things. He's juggling his job that he's walking away from, and he's juggling telling his wife what happened.
So I think he's juggling three. And I understand it's maybe a 2.5, but I think it's a third, and he's outside of his moral box. So he's trying to justify that. And that to me is the most important part of this entire movie and why I want to get to it later. But we should probably just go into it. But like his moral box is very set. He's very particular. His attention to detail in and out of his own life, his own personal life, whether it's working, whether it's through his family, and then the moral box. We all have one, but he has fucked that up a little bit, a lot. He's done
Yeah.
something which is well outside of his moral box, which he never thought he would do, and was a one-time deal. And I think there's a third aspect to it that, to me, that's what I got the most out of this movie. Ultimately, is going many times back to that one moral box and that one single effort, potentially ruining his life and his livelihood. But yes, mainly two.
I think the title of this film is very important too, and it means a few things. Obviously, Locke being the main character's name,
Yeah,
but I also read that it's also in reference to the philosopher Jonathan Locke,
John Locke.
John Locke, yeah,
Yeah,
who has the idea of tabla russo. I forget what it's
tabula
called.
rasa,
Tabla rasa, yeah.
blank
But
slate.
basically, clean slate, nature versus nurture. Are you born the way you are, or does the nurturing effect make you become the person you are? And I wanted to ask you this question: are you more of a nature or nurture person?
So you come at me at a very good time. I've studied this when I got my master's in sociology, and so well, frankly, I didn't know for a long period of time, and then I listened to people on the various sides of this coin because it is, to be honest, I think of it as a coin. It's an either or. There's certainly a mixture of the two, but I think the mixture of the two is much less so than we actually have anticipated in the past. And I will reference Jonathan Haidt, who I read all 4 books of his recently. But with that said, you're not going to get a quick answer out of me here, by the way.
That's good.
So with that being said, I always used to think that it was a nurture. And so like Emil Durkheim, any major sociologist was like, basically you give me your child, and I will create whatever you desire effectively. Like, I think there's a chess champion as well who's like, um, I can make my children into, chess champions, all of them. And he did, but in essence, he himself liked chess to begin with and was desirous of chess. So intelligent enough, but nonetheless, I always thought it was mostly nurture, because there was something to point to, and I think the idea of nurturing is a great thing in that, um, anyone can be anything that they want, but that's not true. It just isn't factually true. It's like saying, can everyone run a sub 4 minute mile? It's absolutely not true. It's 100% not true. Can everyone dunk a basketball? Absolutely not. And so I think no matter how much you nurture some people, it's just never going to work out in some of their goals that they've set for themselves. And whether that's, I don't know, a simple thing of like skipping a stone, for example, then, take the archery derivation to your well off path. So I used to think it was mostly nurture because I like the idea of it. And I've also seen people that have pulled themselves some of their bootstraps and like made something of themselves, and while that is great and all, and I do think there's definitely an impact there, and believing in yourself and striving to become a better person, I think there's an overwhelming amount of evidence to suggest that really is genetics, for a ton of stuff. If you were to take, for example, Jonathan Haidt has referenced this in many of his books, like identical twins who have been separated, even their clothing that they wear, never met each other after like 40 years. They're wearing the same clothes. Basically, they're liking the same music. They're liking almost identically everything up and down their paths, which is fascinating. This isn't just a one-off example. There's like
So you're not
hundreds,
saying,
thousands of these examples.
yeah,
Even
you're not saying
genetics,
genetics and athletics. You're saying like genetically,
everything,
neurologically,
everything,
their taste buds, almost like what they like, what they don't like.
every single aspect. Basically, if you look at identical twins, which is the easiest comparison that you can make of like the nature versus nurture, like the genes are the same. Not fraternal, like fraternal twins are vastly different, or can be vastly different, I should say, but identical twins, same genetics, separate them overwhelmingly. They're going to be virtually the same person. There's differences, of course, and Jonathan Haidt references basically, and I can't remember the exact numbers per se, but he was basically saying genetics are most, not all, but most of like your start. And then there is a nurturing side to you. Basically, if you grew up in a terrible household, overwhelmingly depends on the severity of that terrible household. But if the severity is like, you're watching your mother get murdered, or something, that's something that is clearly going to have an impact on your life. But if it's something like your dad beat up your mom once, most of the time people are going to get over that and be okay. And if anything, a lot of times those people become better and hopefully don't do that to themselves. And there's other people as well. Maybe they have a gene inside them that they repeat that process. But I'm saying I think it's mostly, if I had to put a number, 60 to 70% is definitely genetics, and then the rest is going to be a nurturing side to things. I think going back to like, anyway, that's the long end of it, basically.
Got it.
What
No,
do
I
you think?
appreciate that. Yeah, I don't have uh, an academic side to what you have,
I mean,
and
I don't either. I mean, it's a long
I,
time ago, but
yeah,
Jonathan,
yeah. But you've studied, you've read the books. I haven't put in any of that kind of work, nor do I have a child that I am nurturing and raising, which you do.
yeah, yeah.
So you can kind of see things firsthand. But yeah, I tend to agree with what you're saying, and that there is the nurturing side to it that definitely affects what a person will become. Uh, but yeah, I mean, we are all matter, and just the physical elements of us kind of determine where we might go as well.
It's interesting. Like I'm thinking about my daughter and looking at videos from like when she was, 1. It's like the exact same human being. And she hasn't been affected on the nurturing side of like bad things happening to her. So like, she hasn't had that impact, right? And I hope she never does. But like with that said, I mean, I hope she has a small impact of things that like she has to work through, of course, or else this would not be as fun. But like it's interesting when I hear stories. I wasn't around when I was born, but or I can't remember it, I should say. When I hear stories of when I was a child, like I sound very like almost identical personality wise to how I was back then. And it's interesting. So do my sister and so do my brother. Allegedly, my brother, turned it south in teenage years, but like most of us are just pretty much the same personalities. And I'm really curious about that. I have no evidence to suggest this, and I clearly think nurturing, depending, like Jonathan Haidt said, on the nature of the severity of trauma and those traumatic events, clearly will impact you. But like less traumatic events, he puts them into like T1 and T2. Like T1 is like simple things that
Yeah.
and then T2 is your mother committing suicide, things of that nature. Like T2 really impact you. T1 is just like we all go through it. Um, I'd be curious to see like some science. Maybe there is. So I don't. I'm talking out of my ass, but about like personalities when you're very young. But anyway, let's get back to Locke. I could talk about this forever. I love this.
Yeah, I mean, I love it too, and I think it definitely uh, is a big theme of this film, because we have Locke, who did grow up in a household that we learn was, his father was not there, his father was not around, his father was weak, his father didn't work, his father was away as he was an alcoholic, and he held that up. For him growing up, he was like, I'm not going to be that person.
Yeah,
I am not going to have the same sins as my father. And for the most part of his life, he has been a stand-up guy. He has a wife, kids, a great job, and he's good at it. Um, but he makes one mistake.
what's the mistake? Let's get to it. What did he do?
Well, he was working at another site 7 months prior to this, and there was an assistant secretary. I'm not sure, but she was there on the site as well. Kind of in her early 40s. She was alone. They were celebrating because it was a good pour,
Yeah,
for the concrete, and they had a couple of bottles of wine, and she was lonely, and he felt bad for her, and he slept with her, and he doesn't know her. One
she
of
had
the
she had nobody. She's a bit of a loner. She is a loner,
Yeah.
and he did feel bad for her. Yeah.
So, with a little bit of his moral compass, blurred by the wine, he made a mistake, um, and he slept with her, and it wasn't supposed to happen this way, where he's going to call his wife and tell her over the phone what's going on. He still had what he thought a couple months, because she was going into
Yeah.
labor 2 months early. So he thought he had some time.
Which is a crucial, very crucial element to this story, in my opinion, because I think it changes it. It changes the entire dynamic of the whole movie. Because if you were to say, like, for example, I guess it was a big mishap, and you could say it was a mistake, even on his own part at that moment, because his attention to detail should have been like, well, after 28 weeks or 29 weeks in viability, there's a potential for, and that's, I don't, you don't probably know this. That's the time where basically if the baby comes out, it'll be okay. Where there's like a solid chance that your baby's going to be okay. So at like 7 months, his attention to detail should have been there to say, like, to prep himself. But I'm sure he wanted to wait till, of course, later. Everyone would have in that instance.
Well, he was even waiting, and I noticed this on my second watch of this film, when he was at the very beginning of the film, when he was at the light and it turns green. That's when he made the decision.
But yeah, the green lights. I love the lighting and the reflections throughout of this movie, and some of the objects that are blurry. I mean, I don't, I haven't written them down, but just a ton. Like, for example, him passing uh, a big truck on the side. I don't know if I wrote down what the truck said. I did not, but basically, it said something really cool that actually applied directly to what he was talking about.
Ah,
And it was blurry, and then you could see the visual side to it. There's a lot of those little instances of the colors, but huge fan of the way it was directed and edited specifically.
the filmmaking. I mean, it's tough to captivate an audience. I mean, you can captivate them with words and dialogue, but like it's still moving pictures, and it's still
Yeah,
got to be
yeah,
it's still
yeah,
got to be pleasant to the eye, and it's still got to kind of fit what the story is trying to do. So with all of these like blurred lights and passing cars, and you're creating this kind of movement on screen, even though it's a very stationary film, um,
yeah.
which was really cool. I think he did a great job at that.
Do you think it's hard to pour concrete though, and to oversee people pouring concrete?
I have no idea, but judging from what I've watched in this film and using all my knowledge from this film, it seems like it's a very technical and difficult job because it's the base of whatever you're trying to build. And if you're trying to build something, the tallest building in Europe, that concrete's got to be perfect. And you can't use, you know, M5 versus M6 or whatever he said in the film. You have to use this specific one, and you have to make sure that the load bearing concrete is correct, or you're going to have a disaster.
Don't you think that I understand all that, but don't you think you would have people under you that would? I always like The Rock always used to say, and everyone says this basically, like, um, it's good for you to be intelligent or whatever, but like if you keep people around you who are very smart, it's going to save yourself from, or not absolve yourself entirely of risk, but it'll help you out. And I just think that he had a fuck up hire underneath him that
Uh,
he could not clearly rely upon in any way, shape, or form. Was being told that he could not drink ciders, and he continues, of course, to drink ciders. He's a little upset, as you might imagine. But like, if your second in command is like cowering under, like, I would think in that position, a normal man would want to move up in life. He's like, maybe this is my opportunity to, I can be now the foreman that Locke was, and he's going to get laid off. But like, if he's just drinking the night before and he's not going to prove his own worth while having the greatest opportunity probably of his life, and he's just going to get wasted himself and just on cider, no less.
we are all flawed humans, Jonathan, and this Donald character that we learn about is he has flaws, and
Get some
as do all of
coffee in
us.
you. Get some coffee in you. Stop the drinking. That's not the moment to be drinking, but get some coffee in you and get your shit together. We can all be
He's
flawed.
probably really stressed because his boss, his first in command, is going to be gone, and he has no way to cope with it. And yeah, he could in theory step up to the plate and try and swing a home run, but we learned that Donald is not that guy.
I'm just saying Donald should have been hired to begin with, and he should have been laid off. That's my point. You don't hire a diminutive second in command over the biggest poor in Europe. Like, it just doesn't make sense to me. Like, I just listened to him like, big flaw. I would have certainly laid this guy off. Like, I would never hire him to begin with. Like, how are you going to rely
Ivan
on him?
Ivan Locke says one thing to Donald, which I think is like the ember moment of this film. Um,
Bringing it back.
Bringing it back. And he says to Donald, "You make one mistake, Donald, one little fucking mistake, and the whole world comes crashing down on you." And
Which
he's
is
not
like
just
the
talking
whole movie.
he's not talking about the concrete, obviously, which he
True.
is, but he's talking about his life. And it goes back to what Ivan Locke says to his wife over the phone. He's like, "It was once." And she says,
Mhm.
"And that's the difference between never and once is the world. The difference between never and once is the difference between good and bad."
Well, what is the technicality of once? Just the tip? It's like, where is the nuance here? Like, does
There,
it treat if they have sex and there's no kid? Is that still inside of his moral box? Does he tell his wife then? You think?
I don't think so. I mean,
Yeah, and so he actually isn't as good of a person probably as he thinks. or
We
is
are all
portraying
flawed.
himself to be. Are we?
Oh yeah.
I see no flaws in you, Steven. You are just a pristine, perfect person. Are
I
you wearing a
appreciate.
chain, by the way?
I'm wearing a chain today.
Look at you. Is that a lock?
It's kind of the idea here. Yeah. Gotta
Is there
dress up for
something
the
inside of
pod,
there?
man. No, there's nothing inside. I don't have to lock it.
Oh, we almost made it. Oh, God. I wish
Should
you
have
had your
lied.
mom in there. Yeah, you should have. We can rewind this.
It is a lock. Yeah, there's something inside.
Hey, oh, that's amazing. What's inside?
Picture my mom.
Oh, that's fantastic.
It's very
Oh,
special to me,
man.
close to the heart.
So let
Anyways,
me ask you: would you get nervous if you're the second in command? And you're not Donald, but you are you. Would you get nervous? Because I would get nervous, but I wouldn't be cowering under this. Seems like a good opportunity to move up in the world. No.
yeah, I mean, if I was in Donald's position, I think and I hope that I would be able to. Um, I would probably not listen to Locke and take the calls from the other guy. He'd be like,
Yeah, that's
like,
good. That's a great point.
like,
Really good point.
I can't talk to you, bro. Like, you're
Yeah,
fired,
yeah,
and you're doing some crazy shit. Like, I'm gonna go off on another guy here. So it's
yeah. That's a good point. Oh, by the way, I did write down what was on the side of the truck. It said it's always been. It's always been. It was like blurry, and it's like it's always been. So it's like
always been.
maybe he was always the same as his father.
And that's the thing. He's making a life where he is trying to be the opposite of his father,
Yeah,
and he's proud of that, right?
yeah,
But it's now this conundrum of it's like the scene when Spider-Man has, like, he's holding the people
yeah,
on the bridge, and he's holding
yeah, yeah,
the
yeah.
girl
Too
the
many,
girlfriend here,
too many things.
and that's conundrum. Like, am I going to blow up my family life so that I can witness this kid being born into the world, so I'm not going to be like my father? Or
Yeah,
do I shield it and look away from that and protect my family from all of this and go home and eat sausages?
yeah. I myself, I have the exact same upbringing. Not the same situation as well. I mean, a very similar situation as Locke, but a little more extreme, I would say. And so I also have this strong desire to not be like my father, and it is very pervasive and still to this day. And a lot of what I do or don't do is actually in reference to that. So I actually get it completely, and I would say my moral box is basically founded very much focused on it. But with that said, and we'll get to the point, the main question of what do you do in this situation, which is a huge quandary between my wife and I, and we are rarely on big ticket items. This might be the first situation we were like, no, 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 under no circumstance, and we were on diametric sides of this coin.
Really?
Oh yeah, and it wasn't a heated debate. It was a very worthwhile debate, but it was like very interesting to see another perspective, a perspective I appreciate, but I was completely convinced, not like a right or wrong, because like this is what you would do in the situation. But she was basically, nope, under no circumstance could you choose what Locke did, and I was on the opposite side, and I was like,
Really?
under all circumstances, in my view, I do exactly as Locke did, and yeah. So, and the reason is what you just said. You have a family that you are blowing up. And she did make a good point. It is a fairly good point. First of all, what woman that had a one night stand is like this connected to another human being and is like desirous of you to like, okay, ruin your whole family. I was alone to begin with. I wanted the kid because I was alone and I didn't have anything going for me. I have nobody else, and I do have this child now. But don't take everyone else with you. You know what I mean? Which that actually is a good point. So I will start. I'll caveat it with that, or I will have a placeholder with that. But with that said, I really want to know your point, and I have asked a lot of men, and I've asked a lot of women this, and the difference of like. I was like, is this a woman and man thing? And it appears like it very much is. And it's the difference between like taking care of your family and the blowing up of that family. You're literally losing your job. You can't take care of your family now. You're also losing your family for a child for your one single mistake. And I do think that there's a lot of merit there. I'm still on the fence of like you gotta like be a man. You made a mistake and you have to own up to your fucking mistakes. Full stop. And I think that is the most pervasive. And my friend Mark and I were in complete agreement. He's like, first of all, I would have like shoot, this wouldn't have gotten this far to begin with. Not that like there would have been a lot of things to happen in between uh, the pregnancy for this never to be in existence. But I was like, okay, take the fact pattern for what it actually is. Don't try to add in your own thoughts or whatever. And he's like, oh, I would drive. And I was like, so would I. You made the mistake. You fucking did it. You got to own up to it as a man, and you got to be there. That to me is like full stop the situation. And so my wife was like, well, you can't put this down to a formula. A plus B equals C. And I was like, you can in this situation because it's a moral box. You're outside of your moral box, and you have to then own up to what you did and your decisions outside of it because you should live by your moral box. And I think, and my response was, well, Stephen Hawking would think otherwise because almost every single thing in this life could be put down to a fundamental like code, if you will, or a formula. First of all, but what would you do?
Here's the thing. And I want to ask this question first before I give my answer, but how does this affect his two sons, his decision? Is
It's got it's going to
he
affect
creating
greatly.
trauma for them?
Of course, of course, of course. But his going or not going is still going to create drama. That's my point. There's a child out there and from the sound of it, again, I don't know a woman this connected to a one night stand or a man for that matter. And so I do agree with Sonia or my wife in that point. But like I don't. It's not ruined, but like there's something. There's a huge speed bump to get over, regardless of going or not going. And that's my point.
Yeah, and you can kind of see it in this early on when he's talking to Bethan, the mistress, and she says, "I love you," and he says, "Okay, then, can't you say it back just once?" He's like, "No, but I can be there as fast as traffic will allow."
Yeah, but
He's
that's
like,
true. I would say the same
"Exactly,
thing, wouldn't you?
yeah." I mean,
You had sex once with somebody, and there's a kid that
that meant nothing, but now there's
yeah,
this
it's
person being born into the world.
that's I don't know. Maybe I'm an asshole, but I think it is possibly the difference between men and women. But also, she has a lot of feelings at that moment. I've seen it firsthand. People, that's a difficult process, and if you're doing it alone. My God, I can't imagine. Women are. Thank God, thank God we don't
Do
have to go
you?
through that.
What do you think? What do you think happened the next few days after all of this?
I
Did
don't
he?
know. I thought about this, and I could go every which way. Generally speaking, though, I think the family sticks together naturally and honestly because I think if this were like a multiple time fuck up and it happens as there's a kid, then yeah, there's separation. But Locke is of the essence that this will be one and done, even though he's already messed it up. But this will, in fact, be one and done. He'll own up to it fully, and he will take care of that kid if he's needed, and he will make the time to drive to London to make it work with the child. But I don't think he's going to give the effort, or any more effort that would then take away from his family. Again, I'm just taking the moral box that we have seen and he's constructed in the movie. That's I can't imagine it going any other way. But
One thing.
they could everything just fall apart as well. But he doesn't end up being with his bastard child and marrying the wife or the woman.
No, he doesn't love her. He doesn't know her. But one thing that really stuck out to me was how well they painted the children in this movie, especially the older
Yeah,
child Eddie, and he's explaining what's happening in the football game, and Caldwell the donkey scores the goal, and he says he's realizing what is actually happening. He sees his mother is very distraught. His father's not coming home. He's like, hey, we can, when you get back tomorrow, we can put on the game and pretend that it's live, and we can make sausages, and we can just pretend. We can pretend. And that's what every kid wants to do when something like this is happening.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have this happen in my life, but I was pretending for the last 2 hours before this to go on a treasure hunt, which my daughter drew a treasure map, and we had to repeat it. It was like 6 or 7 times in a row, and then I was like, I should get involved here. I tried to draw a new treasure map, that didn't work. I tried to institute my own rules and be like adding some complications, which actually was very helpful and she enjoyed. But yeah, it's playing whether for the good or to not remember. It's what we all do, right? We try to just pretend in this life as best as we can. We're pretty much actors to some extent in a one-man show that is called life.
This is very true. Very true.
Anyway, I love Locke. This is my second time watching it. I watched it when it first came out, and I was absolutely blown away the first time I watched it. One of my favorite movies of all time. And then I watched it a second time, which is after having a child, and it actually changed my perspective. And also probably talking with Sonia, where I was like, "There's a far more nuance in this movie than I originally on the first watch." Basically, in the discussion we've already just had, but um, I still love it, but I liked it a little less than the first watch.
Interesting. And it's interesting how, I mean, a lot of people say this after having a kid or building a family, like their perceptions on art and stories and things like that change. But that's also with
Yeah,
getting
very much
older.
so. Yeah, I think it's more of like the fact that I have a child now, and if just thinking of him having kids himself, and then he's trying not to be his dad, me, and so I've never made that mistake, and nor will I ever make the mistake. So I'm judging him and the movie ultimately because of that, regrettably. That's kind of how I perceive this. Swimming to Cambodia. I have gone down the rabbit hole many times with various movies. This is an odd one. I like odd movies, or movies that not necessarily are odd, but are just have a worthwhile tale to tell, and one in which that fights the notion of, you know, loosely what is a movie or what isn't a movie. And the movie is Swimming to Cambodia. It's 85 minutes, pretty quick. Jonathan, I don't know how to say his last name, Demme, did Silence of the Lambs in Philadelphia. So major notes here. 1987 rated R. It's performance art, if you want to call it something. I've named it myself. It's 100% on Rotten Tomatoes, but I think it's probably a variety of 2 or 3 humans there. Not a lot of information on this. The 1 million, roughly a 1 million box office. The budget, I just couldn't find for the life of me, and I was like, I'm trying too hard to find this number, and I was like, let's just.
450,000.
How did you find that?
I listened to a in-depth making of podcast of this and how they got the funding
Mm.
and who they got it from and whatnot.
Boy,
So
you need to update that. All of the other pages. I couldn't find anything. I don't have the time. But the synopsis is this: So it's Spalding Gray. It's a one-man show, quite literally a one-man show. Guys on a stage telling a story. He's an actor, performance artist, and playwright, Spalding Gray. And here he has adapted a successful one-man show for the big screen. It's done 13 of these, not necessarily in movie form, but basically where he gets up and he has 13 specials, if you want to call them that. Seated behind a desk with little more than a map as a prop, a glass of water, and a notebook, which we'll
and a
talk about later.
pointer.
Gray, yeah, and a pointer. Gray focuses on a small role he had in a 1984 film called The Killing Fields, which you've probably seen or heard about. Discussing the life on the set of the film and a variety of other things, it just follows a photojournalist in Cambodia covering the violent reign of the Khmer Rouge, and Gray spins personal memories into the larger story as what is Cambodia or not Cambodia, of political unrest and turmoil in Southeast Asia. And ultimately, to give a little better frame, the challenge that overall it's overwhelming tale. It was interesting. I've seen it many times, but it was interesting this time, especially just trying to critique it from time to time. And it's funny, like, if you know comedy well enough, you'll see like comedians will always, I mean, in any special, they'll have slight mishaps there, here and there. Of course, he does, and it's like, can you really like your first, like, you don't know exactly the connotation of how you're trying to say this. Can you like take that down like each time? Like, take a 100 to a 95 performance, a 90 performance. And I was like, whatever it is, that it's one of the best performances I've seen in terms of just doing an act. I don't want to say comedy or drama. It's just an act of a 1 hour act. Although he did perform it like 200 plus times, but nonetheless, the challenge is this: the guys, and what I have tried to frame this as, and I've done a lot of reviews of it. There's not a whole lot of information on this. I probably would have listened to the podcast had you sent it to me. But he's looking for the perfect moment, and it's interesting. Just looking for the perfect moment, and he tries to find the perfect moment in a lot that he does, whether it's smoking weed on a beach, but he's trying to find that perfect moment. And I think it's since this is about his life, quite directly about his life, and the only thing that's actually untrue, as we know and find out, is the banana. The only thing that's untrue, allegedly,
Yeah.
in this film is the banana that we could talk about once this comes, but that was devoured by cockroaches. But he's asking you as a watcher, as a human being, and as himself, is there a perfect moment? And do you think that there is a perfect moment?
And is there a perfect moment in a world that can be so atrocious?
Yeah, I think
And
so. Do you think so?
it's a big theme. I can think of things that can
Let me let me
almost
let me let me frame it again.
sure.
We're talking about the juxtaposition of war and genocide and the perfect moment. So basically, I'll frame it as that. Do you think there can be a perfect moment in
If you frame it that way, then
style?
absolutely not, because the moment that could be happening for you just across the river, the ocean, or wherever it is, there's atrocities being committed that are so unimaginably evil that how can something be perfect in that moment?
Because isn't there a yin and yang of everything? Because like,
There
what
is.
happens if a family, the last family to survive this genocide, and then the war instantly is up? It's like, wouldn't that be a perfect moment? There's no more war. Or even like, if you think you're on death's door, you haven't eaten in 2 weeks, and you're able to just eat a small meal. Would that be a perfect moment?
I think there's nothing that is perfect, or there's no perfection, but there's the striving for perfection that that creates you
Everything.
know, everything. Yeah, and it's that tension to get there, but not quite ever being able to get there. Um,
Nor do any of us ever get there, just to be clear. But it's always you know, I think the big mishap, or one of the major things I think I've seen in an ex girlfriend of mine who always wanted to be perfect, and I would say very cheesily, this was like 20 years ago, like, you can't be perfect, be prefect. It's like so stupid.
what does that mean?
Because perfect is never perfect. You
Yeah,
should have gotten it to begin with. And I also was thinking of Ford Prefect from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
got it.
Yeah, yeah. And I would try to like playfully, like, just perfect is never perfect. Even your idea of perfect is like diluted, not diluted, but it's like prism basically. You can't put it all together. And that never went over well. She always wanted to be perfect, but nonetheless, she was never perfect. My God, at least in our relationship. But with that
Wow.
said, I like the strive, at least, to be perfect. But if you don't make it there, which you should understand that you never will, you should still strive to do it. Be your best.
With Spalding Gray, he it was very interesting learning about this man, and
Yeah.
what he did with this show and what he did later on in life, and we can kind of talk about what his ultimate what ultimately happened to him. But he was performing this show, and it was a 4-hour show over 2 nights.
Yeah.
I mean and it was ever the show was ever changing. It was, there was a structure there. There was uh, things that he would talk about in the show, but he would take notes on his notebook about what kind of worked with the crowd and what didn't, and what kind of went over. And it was ever changing. And I thought that was really, really interesting. And they wanted to capture this show. And I'm so glad that they did, because on film, because we would have never been able to see something like this. We would have never been able to witness
Yeah, it's
this.
gone. Yeah, it would have been gone forever. He's got a Ronald. He had Ronald McDonald. I didn't know this. When watching, Ronald McDonald is on the front cover of his notebook. Not sure why. But he's there. Strangely enough, yeah, it's one of those that I love. Good orators. I also very much enjoy the one man shows. I've seen other of his, but like I like the idea of this, and I wish there was more of it. I love comedy where people are just on a stage by themselves telling stories. And so comedy, of course, is here to get laughs, as I think this does as well. But you know why this reminded me of? I kind of went through the backwards tabula rasa. I went to the backwards like understanding of picking a theme. What we were talking about in previous week in the afterlife, and we're talking about death and the idea of death, and then I kind of took that like for some reason in our discussion of Coco and our discussion of What Dreams May Come, I was thinking of this movie in particular of death. And like creepily, you don't talk about or think about death. And I was like, I kind of obsess about it. And I was like, well, Spalding does too. And then I was like, how can I get Swimming to Cambodia in the mix here? And I was like, what are your thoughts on one man shows? And then that's how I thought through the whole process of how I got ultimately to pitching it to you. But I love the concept of, whether it's good or bad, just thinking about things, and if they're negative like items such as death, but it's something that is, of course, there's no, at least now, there's nothing you could do to change it. You're all going to die. Having the most fun that you possibly can, and being able to talk about things as freely as possible, in turn, if anything, I think it helps you in your mental fortitude. So I liked Spalding Gray's version of this, even though he's in the midst of like a genocide and shooting this movie, and the conflation of the idea that he's there to shoot this movie to begin with, but he's being pampered with whatever he wants, and he basically can eat like he's not eating bugs, he's not eating the exact quote I have somewhere else.
Bark and bugs, yeah.
Yeah, he's eating whatever he wants, but he's trying to find that perfect moment throughout the movie, and I don't know if he can or cannot find it, but the Thai stick, the neuro massage, the visit with the woman at the bar with the ping pong ball, and the stock market is rising. He's trying to turn off the radio, and the last good word and that rising click. He's always trying to find the perfect moment, which ultimately to me is there is no perfect moment, but we should just grasp what's in front of us, the life that is, and embrace it. That's how I perceive this.
Yeah, and he does it so well by weaving in and out of his stories and his timeline and his experiences, and creating that narrative theme throughout. Like one instance is when he's talking about living in that apartment, and the neighbors upstairs are just blaring Bob Dylan at all the time, and how he can communicate. Like if it was somebody where he's from, he can communicate and tell him, just turn it down a couple notches. Yeah, okay, thanks, blah
Yeah.
blah blah. But his wife, who is from that same area, grew up in Manhattan, she can't even get through to them. How are we supposed to, as people from different countries, get through to people? And that's why there's war.
Yeah, it's
It was really the way that he was laying these ideas out. It just struck me like, wow, like this man can tell a story, but also make you feel something that's very, very powerful.
and tell it in a way that's just like so, like kind of like Ace Ventura breathing method, where it's just like, let me tell you about this when I heard it over in Cambodia when I was like playing with the killing fields, and the whole story is shockingly good. But other than Ace Ventura being able to tell a story in that way, which is scripted, and this is to some extent scripted too, it's a fascinating way. And I like the tension, as you were mentioning, like how it's being presented, of like talking about Cuba, and he's like looking left, and like the background sound is like either a helicopter or like tense music, and looking to the right, he's like giving points, and each time he looks left and right. I thought that was so well orchestrated, but it's presented I don't know. I didn't walk away from this movie considering the fact that it's set where it is and what's happening. I never walked away and been like, "That's depressing," which I think is the
It's
point of
because
this.
of it's because of the tone and the way that he tells these stories, and how there is that this kind of still glimmer of hope kind of message in it with finding that perfect moment. Um, but to what you said with like how Jonathan Demme, who's a fabulous director, great director, he directed Silence of the
Yeah, yeah,
Lambs, like you mentioned, takes this and constructs it in a way with the lighting, with the zooming in, zooming out, cutting to different places, even having a camera straight above Spalding Gray. Um, the editing in this is fantastic because it does create that tension. It does create that that feeling of kineticism, and a man just sitting at a table telling a story. That's really hard to do. And the lighting of this movie, like there was that one scene, probably one of my favorite scenes, where he's having a conversation with Jack Daniel, and he's going back and forth. And when he's in that Jack Daniel talking as him, the way that he lights it and makes the eyes just black as night, and it creates a whole new character, but it's still
yeah,
Spalding Gray.
yeah. He's awesome. I would have loved to see him live. Speaking of, so the fact that we even have this to begin with, it's a consolation prize to some extent. But um, going back to what you originally said of like juxtaposition and the quote that I wanted to have, but it's very telling in the way he says this. And keep in mind, in the midst of like genocide and war and famine and all the bad things that are happening, he says this, and I'm gonna do it poorly, but farewell to the fantastic breakfast, free every morning, and there they were. And I'm trying to say it like he would,
Yeah,
waiting on you with papaya, mango, and pineapple. But he's saying it like there's war in the background, like I've never tasted before. Farewell to the Thai maids with king size cotton sheets and the big king size beds. He's saying it tongue in cheek, like
yeah.
I'm there filming this movie in the midst of fucking chaos, and I'm living the life, the perfect moment for pretty much anyone there that's not, you know, shooting that movie, more or less. Yeah.
And I will be the first to admit that I am not always well versed in world affairs, especially world affairs that happened before my lifetime. So
Yeah.
I had very little knowledge of the atrocities that happened in Cambodia. I know about Vietnam. I know about like the gist of that, but like I had no idea of what the actual human toll that happened in Cambodia, and it's just something that we're not taught in school. And
Yeah. I didn't know it until this movie, or at least I was in, or in high school. My high school was not the best, but um, I don't know what else to say. It's tough. It's very tough. I don't think they really teach, even now, as tough as probably should, the reality of what is this world, and pretty much war has been in existence forever. But this is definitely something that's fairly overlooked, I would say.
very overlooked. Yeah, yeah,
I have to go back to one of the major points, and then this is kind of like blurring the lines of reality, because this entire the movie and his life does that with these monologues. And so he, which he mentions repeatedly, and he also, if you know his story and how he died, which I guess we can just get into immediately. He got in a car accident in the early 2000s, I think 2000, 2003 possibly, or maybe a little before then, 2000, and then he died, I think, in 2003. But his whole life even like kind of was a play to some extent, kind of going back to what I said originally. But he was focused on his mom, and I think, I don't know if this is an exact quote, but like he said that his mind was filled with fantasies of his mother in the movie, and of water, and always water. All his suicidal fantasies, he said, relating to drowning. Why water? Why drowning? I asked. Returning to the sea. Our mother, he said. And then he jumped in the East River to commit suicide off of Staten Island Ferry. And it's like it was just an extension. His performance art inside of this movie just became his life
Yeah.
in that perfect moment. Ultimately, that's how I really saw this. And
His,
I myself have
his
had a similar idea of writing a book where the author commits suicide, and then like if you had the author actually then commit suicide in the way that the book said, but nobody could stop him because the book had just been published. I was like, that'd be a great idea, or
This
interesting.
pretty much
It's
happened in real life. I mean, come on.
yeah,
And the fact that his
no, so a trivial like a like a mystery of like how to save the author, and then here are the keys to save the author. The book gets published, and then you have like 24 hours to save them, and the person nobody reads the book and saves that person, then they're gone. It's like a version of Saw to some extent.
yeah, yeah, I like it. I'm down for that.
Yeah, somebody's
Just
gonna
don't kill
steal my
yourself if
idea.
you write the book, please. Uh,
No, what you should say is don't write the book.
yeah. Well, it could be a bestseller. Um, yeah, his mom committed suicide when he was
Yeah,
in his 20s, I think. Um, and was it drowning as well? I can't
I
remember.
don't know how she passed, but
But that's trauma. That is tier two.
it's
Uh,
tier two trauma. Yeah, that's tier
yeah.
two trauma. I mean, I've seen some tier two trauma. Not, I don't know, not probably not in my own life, but uh, my wife she's had some T2 trauma, but um, it's tough. It's tough to get over, and I think if you have a performative human being that has this in the back of his mind, but also in the sense he had major, um, clearly he had major concussive symptoms, and
Yeah.
that's going to affect you greatly in your behavior. But also, like if you can't think straight anymore compared to like what you used to, I think you're gonna. He was very depressed throughout
Do you know
most
what
of his
movie
life.
he watched right before he committed suicide?
I looked this up. I don't remember though. I don't remember.
Big Fish,
Oh, that's right.
which is
That's
a
right.
story
What
about a
became
man's
the
life.
story? Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I did remember that, but I couldn't off the top of my tongue. But it's just he wanted to return to the sea. He wanted to return to his mother, um, and it's very creepy. But also to me, I don't know. As a writer myself, I really I don't want to say I like the idea of what he did in his performance because it's fucking sadistic. But like if that was his plan all along, which I think it probably was, it's an interesting concept, and one in which we're talking about today. And he was an excellent orator. But with that said, the movie I don't know another movie like this that is able to mix and meld the good and bad of life in a fun way. At least I thought it was fun.
This is one of those things that, or one of these movies that you told me very explicitly, don't look anything up. Don't watch a trailer. Don't read the back of the DVD case. Just put it in and watch it. And I did.
Yeah,
Boy,
that's
did
a good
I.
one. Yeah.
And there was definitely moments where I had to just pause because there's so much information coming through. Like, I mean, just so many words. That had to pause because I didn't know where the story was going. I didn't know who Spalding Gray was.
Yeah.
I didn't know that he was an actor in this film called The Killing Fields, which he had a very, very small part. And I was just
Oh,
trying to, very small. And it was cutting to short little clips of the movie. And I was like, is this a real thing? But yeah, I mean, it, it's singular
yeah,
performance, singular
yeah.
movie.
There's two. I kind of I don't. You can't really go into like the factual plot because the plot is just like more of like what's in his head. I mean, I think he's got a version of some sort of like OCD. I mean, talking about clicking the door 678 times. Clearly, he's
He
got an
is definitely
issue.
neurotic. He has
Yeah, yeah.
that neurotic kind of energy to him, and I feel like this monologue that he does on stage in front of people is kind of like therapy for him. Like
It's therapy
it's
for sure, 100%. Like
because they say
no,
that like outside of him on stage, he was a very quiet, reserved person. Um, but this was his chance to tell his story, to get it off of his chest.
it just reminds me of David Byrne and Talking Heads. Spalding Gray was at the same time period around in New York. I think the backing, like they used the same venues to actually do these one man shows as the Talking Heads did. I think I see a lot of similarities in David Byrne, but he was more, I would say, on the spectrum, and I think Spalding was more of like willing to hurt himself, but I have no idea. But I did like one of the quotes that he said about I can't even look at a weather map anymore. It's too big. That's why I moved to Manhattan. I wanted to move to an island off the coast of America. Like in the
Fantastic.
context, there's like a lot of other lines that came before that to give that a little more context. But in that moment, I was like, that's hysterical. And I'll leave with not leave, but like one last quote I have. Let me get into some other stuff, but I have to, I think, read this in full. It's
Go
fairly
ahead.
lengthy, but I do enjoy it. And this to me resonated the most because you're in and out of this play one man show with his own stories, but this was like another inception level of like you're in and out of his own mind, but he's now giving it feeling and words of the moment that we didn't see of the helicopter scene of the killing fields. But it was just this funny because I often have these moments, and I actually have an idea that just struck me, and I'll give it a word here in 2 seconds. It's called L'appel du vide. It's the call of the void. And strangely enough, I took a picture of this like just 2 days ago. And it's a French phrase used to refer to intellectual thoughts or the urge to engage in destructive behaviors during everyday life. Examples include thinking about swerving into the opposite lane while driving or feeling the urge to jump off a cliff while standing on it. Not to say that you have to worry about me. I'm just thinking of these ideas for characters potentially I'm writing. But like that idea was kind of what I thought about when I was watching this. And so he's framing it. He's in the killing fields in a helicopter. So I got in the helicopter and it went brrr, straight up and above this incredible jungle. Felt like I was in a movie. Like I was in Apocalypse Now. And then I realized, hey, I was in a movie. We had no safety belts, but I had no fear because the camera eroticizes the space. Even if the chopper crashed, at least there would be rushes, right? But like, oh, like he's thinking about like, okay, if we did crash, like I wouldn't have to act kind of like it would be a rush. My friends could show them on New Year's Eve at the performing garage. And when you land in that jungle, you don't have to method act. When those helicopter blades are whirring overhead, you just have to shout to be heard. You don't have to method act when you look down and you see a Thai peasant covered with chicken giblets and fake blood in 100-degree weather for 15 hours a day for $5 a day. If they're real amputees, they get $7.50. And I was like, that is like is my favorite part of the whole movie because like it takes
It's
you in and out of
comedic.
his mind. Yeah,
But it's also depressing and dark, and
yeah, very
it,
dark, like
it
very dark.
it's like this light moving, like it's shining a light on the horribleness of war, but also shining light on what his mind is like, how he can interpret it and be funny.
The best way I can explain it, and that's a great point. My dear, we talked about it. Like, who do you miss? My aunt. She just got diagnosed with liver cancer, melanoma. It does not look good. She's 85, and she has
Wow.
a sense of humor still. And it reminds me of this story. She got diagnosed. She goes back in and was just like, we're gonna be just fine. Her mind is like entirely there, but the doctor was like trying to like bring her down, and the prognosis is not good at all. And so my uncle John, it's his wife, and so the doctor says, "Well, you are 85," and she's like, "You're not supposed to tell me that," but like with the like laughter behind it of like, "Yeah, you're not supposed to say that. You're supposed to just tell me things are gonna be okay." Um, and it's kind of like that. But I very much enjoy the perspective, even in the holy shit, we're in an air, like we're in a helicopter, we may die. It's like, oh, let's just think about the creep, not the creepy, but the a different. He's framing it differently and making it
Yeah,
acceptable,
making it, yeah,
which
exactly,
I love.
making it palatable on a level where it's entertaining, but also where it's poignant, and that's hard to do.
Very
Very
hard.
hard to do.
Have you ever been to a show that he discusses a nice, lovely woman who does a variety of things with a ping pong bowl and bananas? Have you ever been to one of those shows?
I was trying to think about that while watching this movie, and nothing came to mind. I've been to burlesque shows, but nothing like what he is describing. But I've never been to Southeast Asia. So,
Mm.
what about you?
No, I haven't been to one of those shows, or that I remember. Actually, maybe I have. Not quite like that, but the whole Coke bottle spraying. Regrettably, now that it does bring back a memory of Montreal, that I could remove from my brain now that I think
You
about it.
are just more
Uh,
cultured than I am, Jonathan.
I guess it's funny. I'll actually mention another, like the tie stick. His the show was his perfect moment potentially, or the striving for a perfect moment. Um, but then like getting waxed up, or not waxed up, like oiled up, and like having somebody like slide all over you.
The way he described that, where it's fantastic.
So
Great.
we actually, it's called a Nuru massage. You ever heard of a Nuru massage?
Do explain.
I haven't had one. I prefer not to explain, but nonetheless, everyone can look it up, and everyone's going to say, "Oh yeah, it's for your friend." Literally, was for a friend of mine. I will not say his name, but there's three of us traveling. We went to go see a soccer match, and we happened to go to Prague afterwards. And I was like, it would be funny to get our friend a Nuru massage. So I looked up a bunch of these places, and like I found a good place that was like way off the beaten path, though. And while going there, I was like, we're gonna get murdered, regrettably. Good thing we're not going in, or whatever is gonna happen to you. We'll pick up your body after. But nonetheless, in the process, of course, we got drunk along the way, drinking some nice Prague pilsners in the sun. And so it's basically, in short, where somebody, I don't, any human being gets oiled up, and you also get oiled up in a restroom, or I guess anywhere for that matter, and you sit on like a life raft, and they just slide all over you, basically for a massage. And you can imagine what happens after. But nonetheless, we paid for my friend to do this, dropped him off, and then my other friend and I, we strange enough, I don't know why, I was like, "There's a railroad track over there. It doesn't look like it's operating," because we sat for like 10 minutes and we're like got kind of bored, and went to go do like a modeling shoot with him. You know him quite well. You've seen some of these pictures. They actually turned out fantastic. But in the process of us going from our home to there, was like it was like a 3 mile walk. We could have taken a cab, but we didn't know it was going to be that long. But along the way we drank. But anyway, we came up with a song that we still sing to this day that I thought was just hysterical. Um, and it was just, as we're walking, we're drinking beer in the street, and it was like, whack, whack, whack him off, whack, whack, whack him off, whack, whack, whack him off, whack, whack. We said it for like 3 miles straight. It just sounds like something that children would say. But
Yeah,
it,
not much creativity going into the lyrics, but I
pretty good. You're gonna sing it after this, I guarantee it.
it's one of those like
It's
it just gets
catchy.
stuck in your head. Yeah.
It's a catchy tune. But nonetheless, not to go on and on. I mean, the plot itself is I like the idea of just really discussing the ability to discuss death after talking about whacking off. The ability to discuss death in a serious manner, but also like in one that you don't have to take yourself so seriously in doing so. I just think he's the best at. I don't know any other. Charlie Chaplin, another person who could just like spit words like this. It's hard. It's more than
Yeah,
hard.
it's very hard. One of my quote for this film was when it's near the end when he's trying to find that perfect moment, and he says, "The sea's a lovely lady when you play in her, but if you play with her, she's a bitch. Play in the sea, yes, but never play with her. You're
Yeah.
lucky to be here. You're lucky to be alive." And that's where I think he found his perfect moment, when there was like a near death experience and he didn't die. And that's the rub.
It's funny. I thought long and hard about not only that point, but also the very last line of like, I understand like Marilyn Monroe and her perfect moment. Um, to be frank, I didn't even understand that. I've thought through it, and I can't choose a path of like what the meaning is. Like I didn't understand it in any way.
Does there need to be a meaning?
Maybe
How
not.
did
But
how did
I just
how did Marilyn Monroe die?
barbiturates. She took an exorbitant amount of drugs. Was found. Um, but it's just interesting, that line. I was like, I know that maybe the one thing I can point to was Marilyn Monroe is everyone's like perfect moment, perfect
Right.
lady, like like so like I can get that point, but I was like,
Like even somebody like that who
it's too like I don't know.
what I think, and now just kind of talking through this is like, yeah, like Marilyn Monroe seems like she led the perfect moment all of her life, right? Beautiful movie star, married to famous people. She's living that perfect moment. And if she can't deal with the life around her where she has to take her own life, what does that say about us?
We all want to take our lives, right?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying
I'm
it's
I'm doing what Spalding Gray would do. That was a joke. That was dark. That was
gotcha.
okay. Okay. A
Yeah,
little
but
more
I,
nuance
I
there.
I have I have also thought about this this last line and how it is. How do you end a 4-hour monologue you do 6 days a week? How do you end it?
Especially
I thought
especially like on the ups and downs though too. Do you know what I mean? That's a tough one because you're like, oh my god, let's just end it on an open statement, basically. Uh, I don't know. Overall, just a terrific movie. I love it. I loved it again, probably even more so this time. Just the understanding of like his mother. For some reason, it hit home a lot more this time. But there was um, I think this is a quote. I don't actually have who wrote this down, but basically there was just a review of it after like 30 years. I said, "You broke it all down to a table, a glass of water, a spiral notebook, and a mic. Poor theater, pretty much. A man and an audience and a story. Spalding sitting at the table, speaking into a mic, calling forth the script of his life from his memory and those notebooks. A simple ritual. Part news report, part confessional, part American raconteur. One man piecing his life back together. Very crucial. One memory, one true thing at a time. Like all genius things, it was a simple idea turned on its axis to become absolutely fresh and radical." Pretty much the simplest way of saying it. There's other things I would add to it, dealing with complex items that humanity doesn't like to address, and being presented with it full frontal, and there to laugh at,
it's
whichever needs to
very
be laughed at.
it's like you said, it's a time of the 80s. It's very punk rock, like
It's
this kind of performance.
it's like the Talking Heads in that moment.
Yeah.
CBGB.
Um, two things.
Sure.
I'm glad that I have a DVD of this now because you couldn't find it anywhere. But if our listeners do want to watch this movie, Swimming to Cambodia, it's free on Internet Archive. Just type in Internet Archive Swimming to Cambodia, and there's the full movie, no ads. Um, I found this later after I bought the DVD. But did you watch the documentary now feature that I sent?
I've been dealing with a child with pneumonia, and even as of today, it's just been very difficult. It was tough to. I had to push through.
Oh,
I had to push through.
Bill Hader does a spot on performance of it's a love letter to Swimming to Cambodia. Like it, yeah, it makes
Yeah,
fun of it, but it's also lovingly endearing.
I should say I saw 5 minutes of it. But why don't we get to the ratings?
Ratings.
Have to tackle a bunch of stuff. This was fun. I am probably. I think I've said this before, but I probably enjoyed, and I would say these are like the most equally rated movies in my opinion. It's funny, like originally the first like few movies I would like go because to get some sort of cohesion to the ratings, I would be like, oh, like let's try to where does this sit? And I was like, fuck that, I'm just gonna rate it as I see it from then on out. So
See it where it, yeah, see where it lays. Don't
so I don't look like I press the numbers, I think about it, I measure twice and mark it and cut once, kind of thing.
got it.
And then I think about it, and then I just put my number down and run with it. So you go first with Locke.
All right. So for Locke, fantastic film. I remember
Yeah,
you were the one that put me onto this. Um, I this is not a really rewatchable movie, but it's one of those movies that like you watch it and then 10 years later put it on again and you're going to get something else out of, kind of like what you talked about.
that's me.
But
Yeah,
yeah, but performance, I love Tom Hardy. I think he did a great job. I give it a 90.
First of all, both of these movies I would not want to watch in the next week for
Right.
the exact
No.
same. Like, it just if I had to, neither of them. I don't want to watch either of them. Honestly, like in their own equal right. I don't want. Let's just take 10 years off. Like they're both intense. For the exact. I mean, I'm right in line with you. I gave it a 90 as well.
Cool. For best quote, I gave some of those quotes earlier, but I thought just that Ember moment that he had where he's talking to Donald, I gave it a 90.
Gotcha. Not comparing it to swimming to Cambodia, but I just comparing it to like what I think is a like it's more of a colloquial type non-quotable movie, if that makes sense. Like there's I think of this movie as no real script. So it's hard to say a quotable moment. Things are nice from time to time, but I gave it an 80 because of that.
Okay, that's fair. Um, as far as editing, no score.
Score?
Sorry, skipped. The score was solid. Out like I do every week. I try and find the score on Spotify and I listen to it. And it's like this tense piano. It really puts you in that mode, but nothing that really like made me think like, oh, this is an amazing score. So I gave it an 80.
Yeah, I didn't think it was an amazing score, but I did like how it set the tone. I gave it an 85 though. I like the tension that it brought,
It did
and
bring tension.
went
Yeah.
okay. Yeah, I like the tension. And then while we're at it, the editing I thought was excellent. I gave it an 85, just the same as the score.
Got it. Yeah. Editing.
Hard to do this one, really
It's
hard.
hard, man. It's hard. Like
Yeah,
you're the fact that you can watch a 90-minute movie in the cabin of a BMW says a lot. So I give it an 80.
got it. What about the screenplay?
I think this is one of the best script to paper or pen to paper script that you can get because it's
Mm-hmm.
fleshing out these characters that are not seen, these characters, and setting things up in a way that you can understand the the level of drama, the level of tension, the level of commitment that these people have. I gave it a 90.
For the exact same reason, but a little better because I and one in which will make sense. I can talk more deeply to, and something that the movie is probably a little closer to home, in the sense of like cuteness. We can discuss in the coming weeks, but I gave it a 95, and I just love the script itself. I love the idea that it had me discussing any movie that, regardless of like what you're deciding on a polarization of a decision being made here, or an idea being made, or I there's so this is gonna sound like I'm patting myself on the back. Anyway, I won't do that. So like the difference between like dumb people and like non-dumb people, I guess, is if you're talking about humans and that you're talking about ideas effectively. So like I love the fact that this movie brought out the response to deciding on what would you do, and it just we went down this goddamn rabbit hole of like whatever it might be. So not neither right or wrong or good or bad. I love movies that do this, and so if you take a step back and say like, oh, this made me feel this way, I don't like it because you can't say that. Now, is there difficult stuff happening on screen? I mean, Alejandro Jodorowsky does this all the time, but I love the forced on somebody, the forced idea thought process. So I gave it a 95. I thought it was one of the best conceptual movies there is, and the screenplay. Without the screenplay, this movie sucks. Let's be honest.
Oh,
This movie's
it's gonna
nothing.
yeah, it's
It's a
nothing.
terrible movie. Like this could have gone horrendously bad.
There's a new
This is the room. The room.
there's a
You know,
there's a new movie coming out that I'm interested to see called Daddy-O that is basically this film, but
Bill
it's
Burr.
two people. Huh? No, it's
Bill Burr.
Sean Penn and the girl from Madam Web. Forget her name. Um, but she's getting in a cab from JFK and driving to Manhattan, and he's the cab driver, and it's just their conversation in the cab
That's
as
cool.
they drive to Manhattan. And it's
Big
gotten
fan.
pretty good reviews so far, so I'm kind of interested in it. But anyways, I digress.
Having a second person there and having facial expressions would probably add to this a little bit. But I think anyway, yeah, it's 95. I thought it's one of my favorites.
I probably should have given it a 95, but I
Doesn't matter.
Yeah. Best directing or directing, I gave it an 85. Again, working within a confined box, playing with the colors of the lights, playing with just the close ups and the way that you can tell a story with just one person in a car. It's just very impressive. 85.
I gave it a 90. I think there was a lot of. I'd like to watch this again in 10 years, but there was a lot of. And look at my notes. There's a lot of tie-in to where I looked up, like when they were passing Luton and what was being discussed there. Like Luton is the football club we wanted to go watch in Man
Yeah.
City, and like there was comments there that like were very deep that I never got, and then I read afterwards, and I was like, holy shit, that's incredible! Like this is such, like you'd have to like basically live there to understand. Um, but with that said, I would like to. I think the directing is better than I thought, and I think I'm giving it a 90, but I think it's even better than that because of those reasons that they're able to tie in, and I think I'm even missing something. I like when he's passing things and when they're out of focus and then they're in focus, and I just I love it. And notwithstanding the fact that he is in a car, that's the factual side of this movie. He's in a car, but what Tom Hardy is able to do through the screenplay, for example, like what number are you calling me on? And then it like pans over to the actual radio to see like who's calling, and then the way his facial expressions work and crying, talking to his dad. I just thought the directing was terrific. 90.
Fantastic. All right, let's move on to your movie, Swimming to Cambodia.
Swimming to Cambodia, and I gave it an overall an 89. By the way, of for Locke, terrific
Oh, mine
score.
overall is an 87.
Got it. So Swimming to Cambodia. So um, very similar, but I think the framework for this movie is just like no other, and he's probably my favorite person to listen to a story. Regardless of the story, I would probably listen to him. Like I would be friends with this guy if he were still around and of my age. But even if not of my age, I just love him and what he does and is able to put forth on paper. He's a little neurotic, but as I've said before in previous weeks, I like people in that OCD on the spectrum, some neurotic self. I like people that go to extremes. Performance is 95.
Yeah, this is a hard movie to rate because it is so punk rock of a film, so different than your traditional film medium. Spalding Gray, again, like I said, he is singular and he gives a singular performance that I don't think. Gosh, I don't even think Daniel Day-Lewis could try and do this. You know what I mean? Like it's
Oh,
just
he could.
so.
He's like one of the few. Yeah.
Yeah. But I gave it a 95 for performance.
There's so many quotes. I can't. I've listed a bunch of them, but 95, and I have like 10 other quotes that I failed to read, but it's just too many.
They had trouble finding an audience outside of the U.S. to sell this to, or like people in Germany and France
Yeah,
and stuff like that. Like people didn't go see it because it was just way too much words where they couldn't get
yeah,
the subtitles on fast enough for you to read, so people just didn't watch it.
of course not.
But so many quotes, so many great quotes, and I give it a 90.
So I'll do score and editing since I did score and editing before. The score, both of which were great, and it seems like I'm shitting on it, but it's just more so the fact that I liked the quotes and performance were just so outstanding, as well as the directing and screenplay. And I just felt like if I were to knock something, although excellent in the way that it made me feel and the tension rising and the directing of like going, well, it's not directing, but like the editing of going back and forth. I gave each an 85 and an 80 for the score and for the editing.
All right. Um, Mine are a tick higher. My score and editing. So the score was done by Laurie Anderson, who I didn't really know much about, but I kind of read a little bit more about her, and she's like, very big pioneer of the avant-garde artist, musician, and to have her on this film was a big deal. But
Huge.
there were moments in this film where the music made me feel uncomfortable, and then I realized it's supposed to make you feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Um, and I like that. I like that. I gave it a 90. And the editing, top tier. I mean, top tier. I gave it an 85, but I felt like just again working with this limited space and being able to do these cuts was really great. 85.
Yeah, I try not to think of it like that. In any of the scores of like the limited space, I just take the movie for what it is. For example, like Glengarry, I've said this before, Glengarry, Glenn Ross. Like, yeah, does editing worse or directing worse because it's in a room? No, I just think you're able to spin a story in the way that you are through editing. Editing is editing, but nonetheless.
I
Um,
I, I think I think about it in terms of like, so a book is a book, but you have a children's book and you have a novel by Infinite Jest or whatever like that. They're two totally
yeah.
different things. So the writing could be good for that children's book and it could say a lot, but like what's how do you qualify these things? You know, or am
A
I comparing
Velveteen
it to?
Rabbit is better than Infinite Jest.
Okay, there you go.
I've read both, by the way. I have finished Infinite Jest in 2 weeks, which is
I have not read it. I've only seen the movie that they
it
did his life
is
on.
it is. I've seen that too. Oh my! I've read that book as well. Oh my god! I'll,
Do
I'll
you
I
do you
don't think
recommend?
the writing is so goddamn good. It really is, but it's just like a compilation of like various stories that are some. It was hard for me to follow. I mean, it's roughly about tennis, but it's hard to follow, especially when you have I don't know, literally a book's worth of footnotes. Like
Wow.
literally, probably I don't know, 200 pages of footnotes if I had to guess. And then the footnotes become tech, like they just it's like a rambling. It becomes like, what story am I in? And like, oh wait, I'm in the back of the book reading a footnote. Like, what's happening? It's
Didn't
very
he
strange.
commit suicide? I think he did.
Sure did.
Yeah.
Sure did. David Foster Wallace, who was given one of the best speeches in the history of life. The university is escaping me, but 2001, 2006, something around that, he gave a speech that everyone should go listen to. Probably one of my favorite speeches of all time about being in a liberal arts college and just life in general. Terrific. I'll send it to you after this. Actually,
Cool.
big fan. Screenplay 95. What's better than this? Simply put, what is better than this? My directing is 90 as well, or not as well, but separately 95, 90. And just what? There's not going to be another swimming to Cambodia probably ever.
No, not at all. Mine again, screenplay writing. Again, hard for me to qualify these, but I gave it a 90 and an 85 respectively. Again, this movie can't recommend it enough for people to see something that they've never seen before, even though it's 35 years old. It's still, even the themes of it are still very poignant today.
Yeah, yeah, we're still right. We're still talking about depression, war, happiness. I mean, those themes aren't going away. It's just a part of who we are as human beings.
Human
But
existence, yeah.
I like different, way different movies, closely rated movies, but outstanding week. The biggest thing I could shit on basically is Locke and what single person would be that tied into. But if you have nobody, you never know what's going to happen if you have a kid coming. But that would pretty much be the only thing. And then the one mishap, there was a couple times where he repeated himself on swimming to Cambodia. But that would be extremely like you're just trying to find fault in something, and
And
we're all not perfect.
I think that's the point of Jonathan Demme leaving those little hiccups in the film. Is this is a live performance. We were watching something that, you know, that life is going to happen where everything's not perfect. And I think that's baked into it.
Results. This is my Milt bought me this, and do you still have yours? My
I still have mine. Yeah, I would have
bachelor
coordinated
party
if I would have known, but
T-shirt. I haven't worn this probably since a year, 6 months after that July date, 2000.
oh wow, I wear it all the time. Um,
Anyway,
we're
this is
talking
fun.
wine next week.
We are, and because we were going to talk some alcohol, but like, why don't we get into wine movies? Opposed, because like how many beer movies are there? You have to be a little more specific. We could have even gone port or something. So we wanted to narrow it down. Like drinking movies, it's going to be. I mean, what movie is not drinking or smoking? So narrowing it down, I'm a sommelier, and so I wanted to actually discuss wine. And have you decided on your actual movie? You are choosing. In fact, what are you choosing?
Oh, I got to choose Sideways.
Yeah. Well, my thought process. I wanted Crimson Tide originally on the Hunt for the Red October, and so you got Crimson Tide. And there's a variety of these that you guys don't know about. We both love Sideways. Did we watch it together for the first time?
We might have. I
Yeah,
believe we did. Yeah.
I think so. And we both walked away. We were like, "What? What? This is what?"
And bear in mind, this is when I knew dog shit about wine. I had no idea about any.
Probably dog
There's
shit
red and
about
white.
movies too.
Yeah,
Was it 2003? I can't even remember.
think
But
so.
it was a long time ago, and both of us were stunned. Thomas Hayden Church is coming back. Big fan.
Big
Uh,
fan.
but nonetheless, I'm choosing the trip to Italy. Initially, of course, my knee jerk is Sideways, terrific movie. But there are I don't want to get into it, but like the trip to Italy, I love, and I love Steve Coogan. I will always love Steve Coogan, the Alan Partridge Show, and pretty much anything he does, but specifically the Alan Partridge Show, near and dear. Anyway, I have to go pick up some medicine for pneumonia child. So
Till next time.
until next week.